there must be evidence on the map to support the information that you're given.
Yes, you cannot say because a town is on the coast that it's used for shipping or transportation unless you have evidence of a jetty. So you have to show and quote that map evidence in order to get the marks.
Okay. Hello, Brandon. Do you have a question? Okay. We will go on to the other sections of the geography paper.
Okay, sure. Now, you've spent your 45 minutes on your map work, either at the start or wherever you feel comfortable, but not more than about 45 minutes. And you now have 3 more questions to answer on Section B, Natural Systems, Section C, Human Systems, and Section D, Human Environment Systems. Each section has 3 questions from which you choose 1. It is important, really important, even though I know by now you have your pet topic, you like this topic or not that topic. It is really important to read the whole question. Sometimes the start of the question puts you off. It says draw a map and you say, oh, I can't draw any map. But the rest of the question is something that can show off your knowledge. You want to show off your own competence, your ability to write, to describe, to do whatever instructions. So read the questions carefully. You choose one, you decide which one shows your best. It doesn't have to be the first. It may not be question 2. You may do best. Question 3, which is about rivers. Question 4, which is usually something to do with vegetation. Or it doesn't have to be. But this is natural systems. Every question in these, every question in these 3 sections, these 9 questions, have the same format. The first 4 marks are for practical skills. It might be that you're given data, given a photograph, given a map, or you're asked to draw something, 4 marks. That is showing off practical skills. 8 marks are for knowledge. They answer the question, what? And the final marks, final 12 marks, this is where you get your good grade, is explain, compare, analyze, be specific. Tell me what you know about the geography of this thing. So let us see. Suppose we are in Section B, and we're being asked now to choose a question. We've chosen a question in natural systems. The practical says you must be able to draw or label a diagram to illustrate a process or feature. All diagrams must have a title, key, frame, and clear labeling. Often, students, it says shade the area of highest density, and an area is shaded, but it is not identified either by name or as the required highest density. And so there are no marks. There's no title to tell us what place we're looking at, especially if your drawing is not strong. We don't know what we're looking at. So please pay attention to title, key, frame, good clear labeling that you can tell. We will forgive poor artistry if you are clearly labeled to show what you're supposed to be showing. You know it. If you're given photographs, graphs, tables, whatever, the answer should be read from the data. So the question will say, study the information below, which is so, and answer the following questions. It may ask you for a trend, it may ask you for a rate, in which case you have to look carefully at the data. But in this section, it tends to be either a diagram or photograph to draw or to read.
Okay. Okay, guys, any questions coming through from you guys? I haven't seen any questions as yet or comments. So I'm waiting on your questions as we go through the sections of the paper. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Ottley.
Okay, so you've drawn your diagram, given it your best shot, or I saw in the report from the examiners you were labeling items A, B, C on the diagram, and on your question paper you didn't put which one was A, B, C. That would be no marks. So you have to associate your answer with the letters on the diagram. So keep in mind, anytime you're dealing with diagrams, you have to refer to it. Okay, second, then you have knowledge. Knowledge will tend to be, it can be list, name, state, in which case you're giving a one word. State, list, the list two types of river transportation. So you're just saying by solution, by suspension. Now, if it says describe, you have to go a little further. Describe would require at least two sentences. So you're saying the river transports its load in different ways. The finest particles are transported in suspension. These are the clay particles. The larger particles, boulders and pebbles, are dragged and bumped along the bed. So you're saying, I know how to describe river transportation.
Okay.
And then finally, use of knowledge, which is about half the marks, a full 12 marks, will ask you how these processes operate. And you really do have to know and be able to explain, this is a paragraph of writing for 3 or 4 marks, how wave-cut platforms are formed. You cannot just say a wave-cut platform is formed when the cliff retreats. This will get you maybe 1 mark. You have to speak to the undercutting, the collapse of the cliff, then the retreat, then leaving this rock surface and so on to be able to get the marks. Remember, you're geographers. You're not somebody off the street. You have to 2 years knowledge, 2 years understanding. Yes, so that is the natural systems. And I saw that it does give students some problems, but you do have to pay attention to the details, the mechanics of these processes. You're writing about frost shattering, you know that's something to do with changes in temperatures and the rocks break up, but you have to pay attention. When the ice thaws, the water gets deeper into the rock, freezes again, expands by 9%. This causes stresses in the rock, repeating, freeze, and thaw, which then causes the rock to break up. So be careful that you understand the detailed way in which natural processes operate to break up, to form landforms, and so on.
Okay, guys, we're still waiting on your questions. We haven't seen any as yet. So please send through your questions as we go through the paper. If the question says to explain, this is a question from Ms. Gaskin, Ms. Ottley. If the question says to explain, for example, explain the difference between convergent and divergent plate margins, will one be penalized for the use of a table in order to show the differences? Yes.
Generally, we would prefer the student to write the differences in a coherent paragraph rather than a table. Because in a table, you're asking the examiner to pick up the differences.
Right.
And so generally, you can be penalized. I didn't mark this year, but I know in the past you could be penalized up to half the marks in that section. And differences usually carries like 12 or 8 marks. And straight away, as we see a table, we say, the person is saying, in this case, conversion margins, they move together. In that place, they move apart. Do you know the difference in what is happening?
Okay.
Does that answer?
Does that answer your question, Ms. Gaskin? I do hope so. All right. You have another question? All right, let's see what the other question here is from Brandon. Which is, okay, for a question which is 12 marks, such as the wave cut platform one, can we simply draw a diagram or write a paragraph? 12 marks? I don't think so.
Okay. Part of it depends on the instruction. Although in geography, I think I can go out and say a well-drawn and annotated diagram will give you some credit, even where not called for. I believe it is on the front of the exam paper. However, remember explanation for 12 marks, wave cut platform, for example, you're going through the steps. Whether in the diagram or in the writing, I would suggest perhaps using the diagram to supplement your writing. You can't say the same thing in both ways, but if you feel you can show it better, then you do. But if it says explain, I would make sure I include some writing. So, the wave cut platform, you're talking about waves breaking on the land between high and low tide, forming a notch, enlargement of the notch to form a cave, the enlargement of the cave to eventually undercut the overhanging area of the headland, which collapses, leaving your cliff. The repeat of this process, which causes the cliff to retreat, leaving this gently sloping rock surface, which is covered at high tide, exposed at low tide. This can sometimes be masked by a beach, because of course all the material from the cliff has broken up and may be on the wave cut platform.
Okay, I think I saw, let's see. So Brandon is asking a second question. So a well-annotated diagram will do. Should he use a diagram to illustrate what he is speaking about?
As I said, because the word is explain, and a diagram, even an annotated diagram, would not necessarily explain, I would still want to have at least a paragraph of writing. Even if it is referring to the diagram and you have it visually, I would still expect some words to accompany the diagram.
Okay, thank you very much. So keep the questions coming, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure there are a couple of teachers who are probably joining us. So welcome if you're a teacher and joining us as well, or if you have your students with you. We know that also happens sometimes. The teachers sit in the class and have their children listen to the webinar. And Ms. Ottley, Brandon, just want to say thank you for answering his question.
You're so welcome.
All right, so you are continuing on the other sections of the examination paper.
Right. Now, when we come to the human systems, we have the same format, practical knowledge, use of knowledge. The practical part, you should be able to at least draw your own territory. Maybe some of the others as well, but at least your own. So that a question which says, draw a label diagram to show the most densely settled area, to show the main towns, or perhaps draw a diagram which shows an area of peasant farming and commercial arable farming, you could do some fair representation of at least your own territory, if not some of the others, and get those 4 marks. Remember, title, frame, key, good labeling to get your marks with the diagram. If it is a photograph, which it can be, or they are giving you data, then remember again, read carefully what unit it is in, what it is showing, whether it is showing percentage of urban population in a town, whether it is showing percentage change of growth. So you read those titles of the rows and columns very carefully, and then look at what they're asking. The first 2 may be highest, lowest, but the second or third part will be something about trends or differences, or where you have to read the items carefully. I came across a question, for example, where the table had the same year in 2 rows. Now that is unusual. Usually 1 year, 1 row.
Right.
But it pointed out whether or not you were paying attention to the data and the question. For knowledge, again, define, and even though you may say this is human geography, human systems, and so, you could write up, you still have to be precise. For example, students could be asked, define population growth. And the student writes, this is how population grows. No marks at that point. It is the change in population of a country over a year, either by natural increase, that is to say the difference between birth rates and death rates, plus or minus net migration. A population may increase or decrease in any given year according to the number of people dying or leaving as compared to those being born and entering. This is usually expressed as a percentage. That answer is 2 marks or 3 marks. The teacher says this child knows what population growth is. They have studied it. They understand it.
Okay. I just want to, for those of you who are with us, and some persons are asking if it will be posted, we'll post the audio of the webinar on our Facebook page after. We'd also like to remind you to send us your feedback on the CXC Facebook page, www.facebook.com/myCXC. Yes, I'm happy to hear that you're hearing our Seagull Bascom. Thank you, welcome, and I hope you find this beneficial. Yes, so we're finished with the...
No, I just wanted to say in the human systems, use of knowledge, which you often ask for comparison, analysis, explanation, you really do know have to know the specifics. For example, it says, the question might say, compare population factors influencing population growth in a named Caribbean country and a named developed country. So you're comparing factors influencing population growth in a named Caribbean country and a named developed country. The syllabus would have stated which countries you could choose from. It tells you what the syllabus considers a developed country. So you say, okay, you're going to do Jamaica and Japan or Trinidad and Tobago and Japan. Factors influencing population growth. You cannot just say one is bigger, one is smaller, one has more people. You have to be able to write with the specific knowledge of conditions in Jamaica or Trinidad and Tobago, or wherever you're writing, and Japan. So, for example, you say, okay, status of women, this is one factor that influences population growth. You have to speak to status of women in Jamaica and the influence which it has on birth rates. You have to speak to the status of women in Japan and the influence which that has on their birth rates. So in human systems, your knowledge in the use of knowledge section has to be very specific
right.
to that place. If you write something which could be any other, which sounds like, okay, birth rates are high or birth rates are low or whatever, and it could be anywhere, then you're not specific enough.
Right. In fact, we have a question precisely about that, where one student, I'm just trying to get her name, that would be Tia Passard, C. Passard rather, she was asking if the question asked you to name in a named Caribbean country, but you give the explanation and did not name that country, what is this?
Less than half marks, because your answer, the examiner required you to know specific information about that country. For example, you asked about peasant farming in a named Caribbean country. Mm-hmm. You know peasant farming at large, small farms, fragmented, mixed, and so on. But in St. Lucia, in Barbados, in wherever it is, in that particular place, the farmers keep the livestock near to their home, plant the tree crops in a certain place, they grow some commercial crops and so on. You would be expected to know for St. Lucia what the specific arrangement is. And so less than half marks, not named, less than half marks, too general.
Right, so you need the name of the country is critical.
Yes.
And I guess that would also contextualize the information that you're given.
Yes.
All right, so...
may I just say, it is true that peasant farming throughout the region does look similar, but you need still to name a place. So you say in St. Lucia, farmers have small plots less than 5 acres in two locations, or in wherever it is, there are landless farmers who so. But once you name it, we can go with you.
Okay, right. So those are some of what you call command or instruction words. Do we have any others? I think analyze. Do you usually use analyze in geography?
We tend to go with explain.
Explain.
But in map work, you may see account for.
Right.
Account for is give reasons. That's
Okay.
what that means. Analyze maybe sometimes, outline factors, a few of the things that we may come across.
Right. What about discuss?
Generally, we tend to use explain rather than discuss, but it's a similar command word. Discuss the role or two reasons, two challenges which farmers face in the Caribbean. So you're discussing, you decide one challenge is globalization and the World Trade Organization. This is a challenge, and you're going to discuss how this is a challenge to farmers.
Right. Okay, so guys, pay attention to those command words. Some people call them keywords, and some people just call them instructions. It is very important that you pay attention to the instructions. So if you're told to analyze or discuss, we do not expect you to explain. If we are told to compare and contrast, we do not expect you to list. We expect you to, as the command says, yes?
I just want to say that we usually say compare. In geography, we say compare alone, but it does mean compare and contrast. It does mean pick up similarities and differences. So, for example, a common one would be commercial arable farming in a named Caribbean territory compared with wheat farming in the Canadian prairies.
Yeah.
And therefore, under headings, and you're expected under those headings to write about whatever topic in both positive and negative ways. You might say both the region and the Canadian prairie have problems with the World Trade Organization application. The Americans protest that they are giving preferential treatment to their farmers and so on. This is similar to sugar and bananas, the problems we've had in the Windward Islands. So in compare, we expect both similarities and differences.
Right. Drawing. How important is drawing in geography?
Very, very important. At this stage, as I said, you should be able to draw your own territory, but perhaps even one or two of the others, Jamaica, Trinidad, and so on, and be able to have some idea of where things are. Because remember, geography asks the central question of where. What is there, where is it, and why is it there? So maps and diagrams are critical. Not in terms of artistry. I know some students get a little nervous and say, it's not pretty, it's not a good diagram, but it's to show the information. It is what it shows. So even in your human environment system, where you could be asked to draw a map to show an area which has had severe impact or which has a problem of pollution, and you want to draw Kingston Harbor for pollution, or you want to draw Grenada for the impact of Hurricane Ivan, you have to be able to give the general shape, that's one mark, a title, a key, and the actual general location of where that thing is. A diagram to show how river cliffs are formed. You have to be able to get the shape of the river cliff and the opposing slip-off slope and point bar, and the water in there. Labeled, well labeled. So don't leave it to the examiner to say, I wonder what she means, because most times you'll say, she hasn't told us.
Okay.
Make sure.
Okay, so Jonathan Gums is picking you up on the whole question of coloring and pretty. He asked if you have to color your diagram.
Okay. Let me see. Color not in terms of pretty, but as somebody who's marked a lot, you get your marks quicker if you use the conventions. That is to say, water is blue, green is lowland or grass. You have some of the conventions which we use, dots for sand. I mean, by now you should have some of those. We will not take off marks if you label it and you say, these purple things here mean sand, and you give us a key. It's okay. But when we look at a map, I look at a diagram, and you use the conventions, you say, this child knows what she's doing, water in blue, sand in dots.
Okay, Jonathan. All right. Salandi, some question asked to draw the outline of a country, and sometimes it doesn't look like the country. Are you marked harshly for this?
Not harshly, but it should look vaguely like the country enough for us to recognize. If you think about it, Jamaica looks, I hope the Jamaicans will forgive me, but I'm just trying to tell you how to draw the shape. To me, it looks approximately like a car. You know, the two ends and the middle coming around and the wheels at the bottom. And you are able to put in the cockpit country somewhere in the center of that.
Okay.
You will get your marks. Trinidad, approximately some kind of rectangle with horns.
Right.
The peninsula.
There you go.
But Barbadians like to say they are a leg of mutton, I think it is. Which I don't think about, by the way. That's what they think of themselves. Right. So a vague shape of circle, square, rectangle, what dynamics and the relative placing.
Okay. All right, Salandi, you hear that? Make it look at least resemble the island. And Jonathan Gum just want to say thank you, Mrs. Ottley.
Welcome.
Right. Get your questions going, guys, and remember to send us your feedback on the CXC Facebook page, www.facebook.com/myCXC. We also would like your suggestions for other webinars that you would like, whether they be subjects or other topics that you would like to be discussed in the form of webinars.
May I just deal with Section D, the Human Environment Systems, which by definition requires you to link the natural and the human. So again, we have data, some practical question about hazard impact and so on, or maybe a diagram, sometimes not artistic, but nonetheless showing the damage from an earthquake and so on, in which you are expected to look and identify whatever they're asking for, that is impact. In knowledge, which automatically, because it is a human environment system, goes in and requires a little understanding of the relationship between the two things. For example, it says describe, that's a knowledge instruction, 2 impacts of land-based activity on coral reef destruction.
Right.
You choose agriculture. You're going to talk about runoff, surface runoff, with pesticides and fertilizers. You cannot, in each case, just say it kills the coral. You need to know which aspect of the environment of the coral is challenged. So you're saying it encourages seagrass growth and eutrophication, which deprives the coral of oxygen, or flooding, sedimentation, clouds the water, the corals are not able to get the sunlight they require. So you're going right through.
Is one awarded more marks for use of examples to aid explanations?
Well-used examples will be credited. For example, in that question, I'm talking about coral reef destruction, and even though the question says not an example, but you are willing or know that the Barbados West Coast coral reef suffers from this problem, and you say it, there will be some credit given. And then finally, use of knowledge. Explain 3 measures to reduce global warming in a named developed country. You have to explain how the measure you describe reduces global warming specific to that country. So if you're talking about treaties which they have signed and measures which they have implemented to reduce the carbon emissions, then you need to see how that impacts on global warming.
Okay, while we await the questions from our listeners, one of the questions I would like to ask you, normally on the exam paper, on the side, I think it's the right-hand side, there's a marks, a rubric with, you might see this question is 2 marks, 5 marks. How should students use that information in determining how they answer their questions?
Okay, yes, that's a good point, and I usually say to students, look at the marks as a guide. First of all, there are no half marks, so we're looking at the award of a complete mark for whatever item it is. Generally, there will not be 2 marks for one statement or 2 marks for one item. Usually the 2 marks are for 2 different statements about whatever it is. So for example, you're describing something. You say it is this, and then you go on for the second mark to say, and this is the feature which defines it. Or you're saying an explanation for 4 marks, then you have a topic sentence. This is my opening shot. This is my elaboration of the point. This is what I think answers your question, and here's an example. Give me my 4 marks.
Okay, so be guided by
the... understand the question.
Yeah, I don't understand the question. Brandon, can you ask the question again? Okay.
Section 1.
Oh, section 1. Oh,
section A, as it's called on the syllabus, on the exam, is the compulsory map reading question. So this is a question for which you get a topographical map, and it will say, study the map of Balaclava in Jamaica or wherever, and answer the following questions. 28 marks in total, but each section will have its own marks. So you will see, for example, give the bearing of the church at so-and-so at Magotty from the school at this place, 2 marks. It means that they are marks for accuracy. If it's 2 marks, then 2 marks for the perfect answer, 1 mark for a few degrees off. That is map reading. But generally, it is 1 mark, 1 point that you make.
So, and you say, what questions do section 1 usually have? So if section 1 is just map reading.
Okay, so section 1 map reading will generally be about 14 marks worth of give state direction, give distances, give bearings, perhaps a cross-section or a gradient to calculate, a reduction or enlargement. Now remember, the scale, as you reduce or enlarge, the numbers go in the opposite direction. If you make the scale of the map, if you're enlarging it, then the numbers on the scale, the scale factor is getting smaller, the actual 1 in 10 or 1 in whatever. And then at the bottom would be your 14 last marks, which are describe 3 features of the relief. So you're putting in 3 features with a grid reference, with something to say, I got this from the map. I'm not just guessing valleys or what have you. I saw it on the map. Account for the relationship between cultivated and non-cultivated vegetation. This is reasons. So this could be 8 marks because they're expecting you to look at where the cultivated is, link it to some pattern, look at where the non-cultivated. One common pattern, of course, is non-cultivated, that is to say the forests and woodlands and so on, have not been cleared in higher areas. High, steep areas, inaccessible, remain natural vegetation. Down in the valleys, the plains, you would find your cultivated vegetation. So accounting for one aspect could be relief. Another one could be access to water or access to markets and so on, what you know from agriculture. So that is the question 1, which is the whole section E.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry, I was just going to say, notice I'm stressing the practical because it's 28 marks on map reading and another 12 marks in your 3 questions. So 40% of your marks come from your practical skills, plus another about 20 or 25 on the multiple choice. So you really need to pay attention to those guys, practical skills.
Hint, pay attention to the practical skills. So get your maps and do some practice of map reading this weekend up till next week, Friday, you have for that exam on the 29th of May. Now, so Brendan, I hope we have answered your question sufficiently. And I just going to go back to, as I said, in my days, Ms. Ottley, we had basically 2 sections, I think, on the geography exam. Physical and regional geography. But from listening to you now, I realize that physical has been expanded somewhat, as well as regional in terms of the human impact and so on. Is there a general, okay, I'll come back to my question because I see Miss Williams here has a question. I've never marked CSEC Geography before, but I have been teaching it from honestly getting good results. And from marking perspective, what exactly are the markers looking for?
This is, I have marked for many years, so I do know, but I've also taught. What we are looking for in a nutshell, and I'm not being facetious, is a good answer to the question we set. And therefore, remember, it costs money to print words, and therefore each word has meaning. So if I ask you to explain how oxbow lakes are formed, I want to see an explanation such that if it's 4 marks, suppose we have, by the way, we do have a mark scheme. Each examiner has a mark scheme, but we are also geographers. It's oxbow lakes for 4 marks. And you just wrote, oxbow lakes form when a loop in the river is cut off. That is not going to get you 4 marks because it's explanation. And so you have to look at, we're looking for the role of erosion, the role of deposition and sealing it off, the fact that they are temporary and they form along the river. We're looking for the fact that you have studied this formation, not just what the textbook said, but you actually understand. So we are looking for competent answers to every question as instructed. And the fact that you say you get good results, is it Ms. Williams?
Yeah.
Suggests that you have taught your children how to answer the questions competently.
Okay, Jonathan has another question. Are students allowed to stand up to interact with the map? Are some maps usually large and uncomfortable to interact with?
This is usually up to the invigilators, but as far as I know, most invigilators, as my experience of invigilation in exam rooms is that they will not let you stand, and therefore you have to try to manage that map as best you can. I know sometimes it blows out the room, it falls off, your geometry set falls off, it can be chaotic, but no, you are trying to manage that map as best you can. If you need to put certain things right near your chair or something so you have a clear desk to work with, you do that so that you're able to manage the map.
Okay. Jonathan, I hope you heard that. No standing up in the exam room. Jonathan says thank you. You're a very manly boy, Jonathan.
Welcome.
We have about 5 more minutes, so you can get your last questions in or your comments or any other clarification that you need. And I'm encouraging the teachers who are with us with your students to also send us your questions in the next 5 minutes as well. So I think Humo Williams basically asked the question I wanted to ask. Basically was what constitutes a good answer. But I think you have given that in terms of answering the questions, paying attention to the keywords in those questions.
Answering the question set. Sometimes students answer the question they wish we set.
Okay.
So we asked about wave action, but they learned river action, so they write no marks. Okay. No marks at all.
Totally misinterpret.
Or you see describe and you take what I call the shotgun approach, which is I'm going to throw everything at it, and then you have no time to do the explanation. It's only 2 marks. So we are looking for the student to write or show us their knowledge and following the instruction. May I just add 2 other things while we wait on the questions? One is, if you run out of space, suppose you came back and you realize you need more space, don't write up the margins. Ask the invigilator for another piece of paper, but make sure you number the questions. This is part of question 2A, 2B, whatever, continued. We do as examiners read the whole paper, look for all the little pieces, but sometimes the student has not numbered it and we're not sure what we're reading. And finally, for me anyway, I know the vexing problem of liquid paper. But let me tell you, I have seen so many scripts where students use the liquid paper, wait for it to dry, and forget to put back in the answer. So please just cross it out and go ahead. Even if you have the right answer, we can't mark it. Cross it out, go ahead. Don't wait time fanning for the thing to dry and so on.
Okay, so Brandon, we do not reveal the percentages for our grade. We have what we call grade descriptors at CXC, like grades 1 to 6 at CSEC and grades 1 to 7, and they are descriptors for those like having an excellent grasp and so on, or good grasp or fair grasp. You can look up those on our website, cxc.org. Okay. You asked, Jonathan asked, what are some of the weak areas the students struggle within? We mentioned some of those, especially map reading and the map work. So my question to Ms. Ottley now is, this is 1 week before the exam. Next week, Friday, at this point, the students would probably be finishing up paper 2. What should students be doing now, between now and next Friday?
Well, I would say, to some extent, it depends on the student. Mm-hmm. I myself tend to be calm in the build-up this last week here. And so I review my notes. I go through exam papers, model answers, which I might have had. Any area that I think I'm weak on, I'm polishing up. For example, I don't particularly like to do soil, so I'll be looking at that extra, making sure that I can cover the content, that I've done everything. Looking for some of the points weak points. For example, I know you asked about the grade 1. From experience, and not giving a percentage, but it's the use of knowledge, the student who can write a competent paragraph, topic sentence. I know students say, but Ms. Ottley, this is not English. What are you talking about, topic sentence? We are looking, there are no marks. We don't take off marks. But it is explained, and we're looking for a student who can explain. Case studies, oh yes, let me say this. I know in some cases the syllabus requires you to choose a Caribbean country for a particular activity. But in this last week here, I would try to make sure that my case studies, as far as possible, I can speak to whatever activity from 1 or 2 countries. So, for example, tourism, you're saying you live in Jamaica, you're doing Jamaica tourism, peasant farming, and so on. So, at this point, you're trying to concentrate and focus your knowledge. You certainly shouldn't be coming across any new things, but if there is, you never quite understood how carbonation operates, and you need to learn the equation, then this week you're polishing up little items like that.
Okay, so do not put yourself under any pressure of learning new things at this stage.
At all. Be confident that in the 2 years your teachers have taught you. Oh, the other thing is too, I know some students like the business of learning the textbook by heart. Textbooks do not know what is on the exam paper. And I'm a writer. The textbook does not know what is on the exam paper.
Okay, you heard
and
that.
Therefore, even though you have crammed the knowledge, and I've seen people right up to the morning of the exam, cramming the knowledge, it is your use of that knowledge. I have seen people who have less knowledge use it well than some of those people who have the whole textbooks in their head and don't know how to use it. So this is application. I go back, get a good rest. I'm not going to say to you, you have to go and set every night, but you want to keep calm.
Right.
You want to be alert, a good night's sleep. I can hear some of you saying, Miss, sleep? I can't sleep. I have to study this. You have to be calm to go into the exam.
Yeah.
Time spent on each section, the map reading, not more than 45 minutes. Each of the other sections, 35 minutes. If you tend to get lost in the map reading, do it last. Just make sure you number your questions. I also didn't speak to the multiple choice, which is a little way away.
Yeah.
But I just want to say you have 60 items in 75 minutes, about 1 per minute. Do not leave out any questions. You have at least a 25% chance of being right. If you do not know the answer straight away, look carefully at the other options. Some will be obviously wrong, detractors. Some are going to be close, and then the answer itself. Work right through, come back to the ones you're not sure. Look for keywords like except. so, except, in which case you're picking out the wrong answer from the list. So students, I wish you well all throughout the Caribbean. I have every confidence your teacher has prepared you well. I know some of you say, Miss don't like me. We love our students. We love you to do well. We love when the principal says, oh, geography, 100% passes, 20 great ones. We love it. We cannot get up and clap, but we love it. So I wish you very well, students.
Okay, so with that well wish from Ms. Ottley, on behalf of the Caribbean Examinations Council, my name is Cleveland Sam, and I just want to thank you very much for staying with us today for the full hour. We actually have an hour and 3 minutes thus far, and we wish you all the best in the exams, not just geography, but the other exams coming up between May and June. And of course, please send us your feedback. Go to our Facebook page and you can send us feedback. You can send us suggestions for topics for webinars in the future. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.